Oh, there we go. So good evening, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join me. I'm Catherine Parker, County Legislator for the 7th District, Rye resident. I represent Rye, Mamaroneck, Larchmont, a little bit of Harrison, a little bit of New Rochelle, and I am joined tonight by some of my colleagues. I'll actually turn it over to Legislator Ruth Walter if you want to say a word of introduction.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm Ruth Walter. I represent the 15th District, which is North Yonkers, East Yonkers, and the Village of Bronxville. I'm a new legislator, but I did tour Playland with my other colleagues, Vidat Gashi and Colin Smith. It's a beautiful place, and I'm interested in hearing more tonight. Thank you.
And next we'll hear from my colleague, Legislator Damon Marr.
Hopefully I'm loud enough. Am I loud enough now, Catherine?
Sort of. Talk loud.
I will shout. I will shout as I did, everybody stay seated until the ride is completely stopped, which I and my 4 siblings said a lot of times in our teenage years when we worked at Playland. So I am Damon Marr. I represent the 10th District in the County Legislature, which is about half of New Rochelle, plus all of Tuckahoe and all of Eastchester that is outside of the 2 villages as well. And yeah, I'm a lifelong Westchester resident. Very fond memories of going to Playland with my parents and taking my kids. And as I said, worked, as my whole family did, worked there summers. And it's one of our great historic resources, and that is the basis of any conversation or any thought or legislative action I'm going to take with regard to Playland.
Excellent, thank you. And I see we've been joined by our newest colleague at the board, Legislator Tyree Woodson-Samuels. Legislator Woodson-Samuels, would you like to say hello to our attendees and let them know who your constituents are, which communities you represent?
Sure. Thank you so much, Legislator Parker, for putting this together. So I thank you for that. As aforementioned, I'm the newest member of the gang here up at the Board of Legislators. I represent the 13th District down in the city of Mount Vernon. So not too far away from Playland. Playland is a major employer of the youth in our city, and it's a major resource for the county. So I appreciate you putting this together, Legislator. Happy to be with everybody here today. Thank you.
Excellent. We are also joined on the panel by Mayor Josh Cohn. Mayor, would you like to say a few words now?
Thank you.
Oh, you're muted. Unmute yourself.
That should be better.
Yes.
Thank you. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you for organizing this session. Playland, of course, is a wonderful county facility in the middle of Rye. It's of huge importance to the people of Rye, a huge asset to us. We enjoy it tremendously. And understanding what the arrangement will be with respect to Playland going forward is just of terrific importance to us. So thank you very much.
Excellent. So I thought I would start with a little bit of history related to Playland, not the history that from 1928 when Playland was built, but history that goes back as far as 2010. Because I know that some of you who have joined tonight are newer to the community and may not know about why we're even having this conversation. How did we get to this point today? And I thought if we started back in 2010, that should, I think, help give a clear picture of what has been happening for more than the last decade. But in 2010, first of all, I was a much younger woman, but I was also on the Rye City Council. And there was a new county executive. At that time, it was Rob Astorino. And he had just been elected. And in his first month in office, in January of 2010, he announced that he was putting out a request for proposals to reinvent Playland. And he based the need to go for a public-private partnership on the premise that Playland lost money. I will say that statement is true, but it's worth understanding again that, Playland was built, as I said before, in 1928. And over the years, it's needed a lot of capital investment. We redid the boathouse, the North Bathhouse, where the Westchester Children's Museum is. We purchased a lot of rides that had been leased there for many years. We restored the music tower. And, those are all really beautiful Art Deco buildings. And so when it comes to operations, yes, Playland loses money, but not as much as you may think. Most of what goes against Playland is just the cost for upkeep on those beautiful buildings and the upkeep for our park. So in 2010, when that announcement had been made, and as a Rye City Councilwoman, I helped create the Playland Strategic Planning Group, a separate group that for Rye residents, so we could help decide what would be in the best interests of Rye citizens. But understanding that at the end of the day, Playland is a county facility. It's a little bit like the Vatican City to Italy, as I like to say. It's separate and apart. The county is the authority and has the jurisdiction for Playland. And this isn't on Mayor Cohen, but before Mayor Cohen, the previous administration had actually filed a lawsuit, sued the county for who did have control and the lead control over anything that happened at Playland. And the city of Rye lost that lawsuit, and they lost on appeal too. So anyway, back to the request for proposals. That's an RFP. There were 12 proposals submitted in response to the RFP. And some people on this WebEx may remember the original accepted proposal was from a group that had deep roots in Rye. It was called Sustainable Playland Inc., or SPI. And that deal was moving ahead pretty quickly in 2012 and 13 until it was discovered that they had not just plans for a small sports building, but they actually wanted to build a 90,000 square foot sports complex in the Playland parking lot. And the Playland parking lot, as many of you may be aware, it's in a flood zone. There was a lot of concern by, both the neighbors nearest to Playland. A lot of people just thought this was very problematic. And in fact, SPI ended up withdrawing their proposal to move forward. And as part of every agreement going forward, there's no sports complex or no sports fields in the parking lot. That's stated in every agreement after that. In 2015, Standard Amusements was then chosen as awarded the RFP. And a deal was made with both branches of county government, the county executive and the Board of Legislators. So just a little background on Standard Amusements. Standard Amusements had two principals. One was Nick Singer, who was the money person. He had previously been part of a hedge fund, and Jack Felfus. So he was the one that had all the amusement park experience, over 30 years running amusement parks like Knott's Berry Farm in California and Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio. In the terms of the agreement that was voted on by the Board of Legislators June 15th, 2015, were as follows. One, there was a annual payment made that was to be made $300,000, an initial payment of $250,000 to the county, and then another $250,000 when the county approved all the capital projects. And then once the commencement date came, which was back from that original agreement, was actually supposed to be October 31st, 2015. Standard was to pay the second initial payment of $1,750,000. Standard was also to invest $22,750,000 within the first 5 years of management. and the county was supposed to receive 7.5% of net profit after the manager was able to recoup their original investment. And the term is very important. It was a 15-year term. And then an area that a lot of people, I think, have always had concerns about, all the public non-gated spaces was, it was spelled right out in the agreement. Those were all supposed to be maintained and open for the public. Now there is another section, section 2A on page 4, for anybody that really enjoys reading long documents. This is 66-page agreement. So I'm kind of hitting the highlights, and there's a lot more. But if you go to section 2A, page 4, it dealt with all the capital needs that I spoke about earlier. And it said, and this is in quotations, in accordance with the terms and conditions of this agreement, manager, that's standard, at its sole cost and expense shall manage, operate, maintain, and repair Playland Park in accordance with standard industry practices, and shall in due course of daily management make all repairs to the grounds, walkways, paved areas, facilities, buildings, structures, equipment, rides, and other infrastructure at Playland Park, except for the county's responsibilities set forth in another section, section C. So let me talk about section C. This was a section that I had actually worked on adding to the agreement before we voted on it. So at the time, in 2015, I had my concerns that maybe the county hadn't been keeping up on the needed infrastructure projects. And I felt like any good partnership, there should be skin in the game from both parties. And while both reap the rewards, both should be committed to some of, making sure that the park is taken care of. So in Schedule C, we outlined capital projects that would be the responsibility of the county. And they were the North Boardwalk. That's the boardwalk that connects behind Playland that goes out towards Edith Reed. The colonnades, LED lights on the Playland Parkway, Playland structural rehab of the Midway roof, the parking lot, the pool, a fire suppression system, and the Playland pathway. I also had added in that understanding that, again, though the county had jurisdiction over Playland, that Rye, as a neighbor, as being the host community, had a need to be heard, and there should be a mechanism in place to have concerns heard. And so language was added to create an advisory committee made up of members from the City of Rye government, Westchester Children's Museum, Rye Town Park Commission or Friends Group of Rye Town Park, the Rye Historical Society, and other similar groups. Edith Reed was actually named as one of the groups. And an advisory committee was formed. Now, something I wanted to add, and I'll just throw it out there because who knows, maybe this can come back at some other point in time. But I had wanted to add standard putting a trolley to pick up people at the train to take them to Playland, but that could be utilized by Rye residents as a commuter bus to make train station and Purchase Street stops in the times when the park isn't open, but people could use that transportation. But we got some pushback from Rye officials at that time. And then a couple of areas that I think it's worth mentioning were not included as part of the agreement for management was the Tiki Bar and Pier Restaurant, the Ice Casino. On the Ice Casino, it had its own request for proposals, and we had an agreement with a management company that was signed in 2014. And then also the Westchester Children's Museum. And so that's basically the agreement from 2015. It passed with support of all 17 legislators. And after that, into October 2015, now remember, October 31st, 2015 was the date when commencement of the agreement was supposed to take place. Unbeknownst to the Board of Legislators, Standard had asked the Astorino administration if they could have an additional 5 months to work on their due diligence of the park and projects before they decided whether or not to sign on the dotted line. And that was granted. And then after that, during the time that they were doing their due diligence, there was additional conversation, I guess, with the Astorino administration and Standard, and a new amended management agreement was issued in, I think we received it in April of 2016, and it was voted on, I think, May 2nd of 2016. And in the terms there were, again, $300,000 for an annual payment with a 2% increase in year 2. Standard now would invest $27,750,000, so up from $22,750. And profit share went to a different percentage, 8% for years 1 through 10, 10% for years 11 to 20, 12% for years 21 to 30, once the manager recouped its initial payment. And as I said before, it was a 15-year agreement in 2015. Now the agreement was twice as long, a 30-year agreement. And then the same initial payment of $500,000, which ultimately was paid to the county. But the second initial payment of $1,750,000 that was included as part of the agreement in 2016, but to date, that money has never been received. All capital projects for Playland, all of them that we had outlined in the county each year does a capital budget, goes through and lists all the capital projects. Now, everything that was listed as a capital project for Playland was now squarely in the bucket of the county's responsibility according to the amended agreement. So in essence, what went from 2015 as a list of projects that would cost the county somewhere less than $60 million now went to nearly double that. And Section 2BB was in the previous management agreement, but I think it's important also to note that in Section 2BB, it said it is a material element of the agreement that the manager, again, that's Standard, utilize professional management in operating Playland Park. In particular, the services of Jacob T. Jack Falfus, who shall be deemed key personnel under this agreement. It went on further to say that no replacement shall be made to key personnel until the manager notifies the Commissioner of Parks. Commissioner, it didn't say Parks, but it is the Parks Commissioner, in writing that the replacement has similar or better qualifications than the incumbent. So given the change to the amount of money the county would have to expend on capital projects and the length of the term, in my opinion, then in 2016, the agreement was no longer worth the risk of entering into a public-private partnership. And I voted against that amended agreement. But, the majority of my colleagues on the Board of Legislators voted in favor of that agreement. So that agreement is what the current County Executive Latimer, inherited. And I would have thought, to be honest with you, that Standard would have kissed the ground, and thanks to God that this agreement, the 2016 agreement, it clearly favored them, and I would have thought they would have done everything in their power to ensure that they did everything according to the agreement, but they didn't. Instead, Jack Falfus, the key personnel, who was the one with the amusement park experience, he walked away in 2016, shortly after that second amended agreement was voted on. And unfortunately, Nick Singer, when we had been hearing that Jack Falfus was no longer with the company, Nick Singer came into our committee meetings and wasn't honest with the Board of Legislators and did not tell us that initially. And then, as I mentioned earlier, that the county was supposed to receive a payment of $1,750,000 after the county had approved, or the Board of Legislators had approved, all the capital projects, which we did. The entire laundry list of capital projects was approved by the Board of Legislators. but that a payment of $1,750,000 was never received. And then, not that this has to do much with the agreement, but sort of the coup de grace that was really, I think, telling all of us that this relationship was not a good path to go on. You know, in 2019, when we had a meeting of the advisory group, Standard Amusements, you know, began a negative PR campaign ahead of our 2019 season, basically trying to derail the success of Playland and the new leadership in the county. So in 2018, County Executive Latimer had tasked the county attorney and his director of operations with reporting to the administration and the Board of Legislators what their analysis of the agreement and what the appropriate course of action for the county to take. And by May 2019, after the report had been given to the county and the Board of Legislators, the county executive announced that he was terminating the agreement with Standard. Standard's next move was kind of interesting. I don't think that I certainly saw that coming. They declared bankruptcy and claimed the agreement as their only asset. So the judge in bankruptcy court appears to strongly favor helping to avoid bankruptcy and has mandated that both sides go back to the negotiating table, which brings us to where we are today. So what has been proposed as a settlement between Standard and the county, this was done with lawyers negotiating, our county lawyers and Standard's lawyers. It has, you know, was given to us without input, obviously, from anyone on our floor, but we are looking at this. And so some of the things that we've been asked to approve, the annual payment is now at $400,000 with a 2% increase beginning in year 2, so that's up from $300,000. The term of the management agreement is now as much as 34 years, because it's based upon the county's schedule to complete all of their capital projects. The Tiki Bar is now included in what Standard Amusements will manage. Once the management agreement with the current vendor for the ice casino ends, this is also something that will fall to Standard to manage. And in addition to the annual payment, the county will get 5% of gross revenue with year 1 and before Standard recoups their initial payment and investment. And then this was an interesting one. A monitor will be hired, and the lawyer's been agreed upon by both parties. He has a pretty great, very handsome rate of $1,300 an hour. And the monitor's job is to help resolve any disputes that may come up. And the term for this monitor is that he will be utilized for 5 years, probably with quarterly meetings unless situations occur. And then again, going back to the list of capital projects from 2016, and unfortunately, those are still entirely on the county. So we've been having meetings for the last 2 months, and those meetings are available to watch at our westchesterlegislators.com website. And I'll share with you my initial thoughts. After having, you know, vetted this agreement for the last 2 months, I think that, you know, we used to receive revenue of $250,000 from the Tiki Bar under the last owner, and to include the Tiki Bar in exchange for an extra $100,000 and the promise that the rest will be made up in with percent of gross revenue brings with it some issues. We've learned that Standard Amusements plans to demolish the current space and build something bigger. They expect to make over $8 million from the Tiki Bar alone. And, you know, what does their plan look like? We don't really know. But what we do know is Standard will now be the only game in town. And I personally think a little competition, especially when it was a Rye family who was going to be opening the new Charlie's. They will be opening the new Charlie's, but a Rye family who would be sensitive to the community. I really felt that that was a really good thing. The cost of capital upkeep. So this is something that has, as I say, was certainly a deal killer for me in 2016. And it's truly the original reason why we even entered and considered entering into a public-private partnership right at the beginning. It was to save taxpayers money. So we're giving up a huge portion of the gross profit, yet assuming 100% of the infrastructure, cost of infrastructure improvements. So to think of it in simplistic terms, if we're spending over $100 million over the course of 30 years, that's still over $3 million. And unfortunately, I don't think that we have an opportunity to really make up much of the difference of that. And then the lifespan of some of these projects, like a parking lot, that's not 30 years. That lifespan is more like 10 years. So we'll have capital upkeep for infrastructure that'll be brand new, but in 10, 15 years, we're going to have to keep up with that. And then what about the capital infrastructure costs at the end of the agreement? So you know from your own homes, you know, you put a new roof on today, in 30 years, you're going to be looking at putting on another brand new roof. So essentially, I don't think we've really solved anything. And I believe that it'll only make Playland vulnerable to people who will say that we should just get rid of it, and, you know, who don't care about Playland as part of our culture and our history in Westchester and in Rye. And then there's that monitor. So basically, I liken the situation to being in an abusive relationship and being forced to marry your abuser, but already having the divorce attorney working on the mediation at $1,300 an hour. So before I open the floor to folks who want to put their thoughts on the record, I just wanted to also share with you a few ground rules of how we have these meetings for the county. At the Board of Legislators, we give people 3 minutes to speak. And if you would keep your comments or questions to the substance of the management agreement that my colleagues and I have been vetting for the last couple of months, that would be great. If you have questions related to plans for the upcoming season, I will ask, and I'm sure I'm going to speak for somebody who's on this call today, Bill Myers, who is the chair of RISE Playland Advisory Group. He's holding his meeting next Tuesday night at 7:30 to talk again about operations and sort of the day-to-day quality of life issues. And I'm sure he would agree you're welcome to join that meeting. I'll actually also be on that meeting, and so will one of our parks, county parks commissioners. So I would ask you that you keep those questions for then. And then in the meantime, let me just go and see also Legislator Catherine Borgia. I thank you for joining us. Would you just like to introduce yourself to folks and you know, let them know where you represent and anything else you'd like to add? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. Yes, I am Catherine Borgia. I represent District 9, which is Ossining, Brookcliff, Croton, most of Cortland, and a little bit of Peekskill. Playland has been an issue for the 10 years that I have on the board. I was actually on the board. I don't believe Legislator Parker was with us when we found out that the sustainable Playland deal, the real problem with it was besides the playhouse that they wanted to build, was that they didn't have financial backing. They didn't have, when we asked them, I pressed them actually for some finances, they were not able to produce those. So it's been a very long history of trying to figure out what is the right way to go forward, with a lot of back and forth. And, you know, obviously the change in administration, the Latimer administration is trying to make the best of some bad situations that they did inherit. I will say that Playland is our park, owned by the people of Westchester County. We have made a very substantial investment in the park in the past, promised to make and have begun to make in the past several years that I have been chairing the Budget and Appropriations Committee. And we would do that regardless of whether or not we ran the park or anyone or a management company ran the park, because it is, if we want to save Playland for the future generations, it is required that we do invest significantly in the infrastructure of that park. So we are in the process, as Legislator Parker has said, we are in the process of a long vetting. It was complicated by the fact that we're in the middle of a sort of protracted legal battle with, or legal negotiation with Standard. That does include the bankruptcy court. And, I believe that our counsel, John Nona, or the county attorney, who works both for the Board of Legislators as well as the county executive, has done a yeoman's job in making the contract that we're working off of a better contract. So that's the process that we're in. Legislation is messy and imperfect. I think we're very anxious to hear what people have to say, but also understanding the parameters that we're in right now. So thank you very much, Catherine, for allowing us to have this forum with your constituents and anyone else who's on.
Great, thank you. Legislator Kitley Koval, you joined us. Would you like to introduce yourself or put anything on the record?
Thank you. I represent Northeast Westchester, Poundbridge, Mount Kisco, Lewisboro, North Salem, Town of Bedford, and a little bit of Somers. And I have heard and attended Playland many times, as have many of my constituents, but I am very eager to hear from people who live close to it, because I think that in the end, that is truly the people that are going to be benefiting we all will pay for the upgrades, but I really am eager to hear what other folks have to say. So thank you.
Sure, thank you. Okay, so now my legislative aide, John Filiberti, would you like to unmute people as they've come in?
Yeah, if Hillary Chernin is there, I'm gonna be unmuting Hillary. She's the first on the list.
Great, thank you.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to have an opportunity to be heard and also to hear everybody else. And thank you to Legislative Parker for having this forum. It's extremely important. First and foremost, I'm sorry I can't turn my video on. I'd like to, but it's not cooperating. So I'm speaking as a Rye resident, as a taxpayer, as a lifelong Westchester County resident. Westchester County is my home. It's my children's home now. My parents grew up here, and I feel very strongly about Playland, and I feel very strongly about the feelings of what's happened here. I would like also to put on the record that I am the new licensee for the Charlie's Pier restaurant that is on the grounds of Playland. I'll give you a little background, and again, my perspective first and foremost is as a resident and as a small business owner is second, because this is my home and this is my children's home, and I want it to be the best place for them to grow up, and I also want it to be accessible and enjoyable, and everything it has been for so many generations prior. So in October of 2019, Westchester County put out a RFP, which is a request for a proposal for the operation of the Tiki Bar, which we're going to refer to the Tiki Bar because that's how people know it, as the Tiki Bar site. And the RFP was put out for a operator to take on operations for a 5-year period, and the minimum was requested at a generally based on what the other percentages for the other years was an average of about $223,000 in a licensing fee. I mind you, this is for operation of a at most 4-month venue, which is a quite high operation, quite a high fee for 4 months of business. But nevertheless, that is the fee for the operation of that site. So in putting out the RFP, the county was seeking an operator, a seasonal operator. Although they said it could be year-round, the venue is not really conducive as it is to year-round operations. And we put out the proposal on the site really with the intention of bringing that location back to the community, reviving it as a local spot for someone who has young children and knows the need for family venues and places that you could go that you could feel comfortable. And really there's no other location like that spot in Westchester County. It is one of the largest outdoor dining locations, to be directly on the water, to be close to an old fishing pier. there's nothing more nostalgic and lovely and truly captivates what Playland and the Long Island Sound stands for is that site. So
Another
seeing that,
30 seconds.
sorry, seeing
sorry.
seeing that opportunity, we decided to enter into an agreement on that site. And only after we entered into agreement and signed on the dotted line and proposed an investment upwards of $100,000 in improving some things at that site, were we informed, again, after the contract was signed, that the site would then be given after a 2-year period to Standard Entertainment. And the irony here is that Standard Entertainment bid on the RFP and lost. So as having their sites on this site for a very long time, they found a way to obtain the site through a very backdoor process, I would like to say, and really not only to take over the site, but are going to demolish the site that people love and know and people appreciate, and change the entire face and the entire footprint of one of the greatest locations in
I
Westchester
have to
County.
call time. I'm sorry, Hillary.
No problem.
Thank you, Hillary.
I have a lot more to say, but I understand time is limited. But I would just want.
I think I'll tell you what. Let's go through our list of people, and then if time allows, we'll let you circle back.
Okay.
Okay, next is going to be Joe Stout. Give me 1 second, Joe, and I'll unmute you. Joe, you should be able to speak. Joe, are you there? If not, we'll come back to you, Joe. Okay, is Henry Neal on? Henry?
Yes.
Okay, you're on.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Sean, and thank you very much, Legislator Parker. This is a great opportunity for a lot of us to share some thoughts, and I do appreciate you going to this effort. I did speak once before the county board about 2 years ago, and at the end of that, Legislator Walter came to me and promised that she would give me a 3-minute egg timer. And that you would also give one to Chairman Boykin. So there'd be 2 3-minute egg timers. I didn't get mine. I don't know if the chairman got his, but I'll try to stay within 3 minutes or close to it. I'm here as an individual. I represent nobody except myself. I have, however, attended all of the board's open committee meetings. I read the plan. I've done a certain amount of work. I'm still amazed by the fact that where we are with this litigation. When Standard declared bankruptcy under Chapter 11, that's a procedure to protect the debtor from creditors. The county's not a creditor. The county has no claim against them. There was an expansive interpretation by the court that we're in the county's an interested party because of the contract being Standard's only asset. Except it's not an asset that they could borrow on. They couldn't go into a bank and say, we're not doing any business now, but we expect to be, and we think we'll make money in 20 years, so lend us money now. No bank would do that. So I'm mystified by where we are with this litigation and why we're here. The one concern I have is looking at the way disputes are resolved under the agreement. It's basically all one way. It's all enables Standard as the manager to make changes in the agreement. It doesn't allow the county, represented by the County Parks Commissioner, to make changes or modifications or requests. There's a proposal floating around that's sometimes referred to as the best interests amendment, which would allow the county to make or request changes in the best interest defined very broadly, affecting the guests who come to Playland, not the finances, not the structure, not the long-term capital commitments on either side. Excuse me. But the experience of the people. And so far, I don't know what's happened to that. I'm not sure whether the county attorney is interested in it or anybody's really pushed it. But I think it would be important to have some modification in the agreement that would permit a voice on behalf of the people who will be using the park for the next 34 years to make or request some changes that affect their safety, their enjoyment, their welfare at the park, not necessarily or completely not affecting the larger cosmic financial issues. I think ultimately what we're talking about is a park. It's a park that goes back a long time. As a matter of fact, for what it's worth, the covenant that restricted the Edith Reed sanctuary forever
Henry, we need you to wrap it up. I'm sorry.
was drafted by me and Gary Corwin some 30 years ago. So that's my only request, that there be some attempt to modify the agreement so that the Commissioner of Parks can advocate on behalf of the people who use the park going forward. I didn't get an egg timer, but I came close.
Thank you, Henry. We've also been joined by Legislator David Tubiolo. I don't see you, though, in the list of panelists. John, are you able to unmute Legislator Tubiolo?
Hold on one second.
And David, if you want to say a few words and let people know who you represent.
I gotta find, he called in, so I gotta find his phone number. So bear with me.
It ends in 3375.
It's not, you know what, I can't find it.
That's all right. Sorry about that, David. Can you go back to Joe Stout?
Yeah, give me 1 second. We'll try Joe again. Okay, Joe, if you can hear me, I just unmuted you. Just check to make sure your computer is not on mute. I don't think we're having any luck.
If he's on the phone, he may have to do *6.
I'll tell you what, while you're trying to fix that, I did receive some questions from people in emails. So one of the questions I received was from Kate Tiedemann about the pool, and she wanted an update on the pool project. And so the project is, as we discussed in 2018, that the county back in 2009 had done a pool study, and what was recommended was a shallower pool that had a walk-in entrance, which is safer for smaller children, and then the area at the far end is still for people who would like to swim laps. And our Commissioner of Public Works is reassured me that it's deep enough to do a kick turn, because I know you're a big swimmer. See. Henry, can you go on mute, please? Henry Neal?
What?
Can you mute yourself, please?
I take care of it, Captain.
Oh, great. Thank you. Next, we had a question from Steve Vasco. What is the status on those capital projects? And you asked some specific questions, the electrical switch building, which if you look in the parking lot at Playland, that work is happening now. And then the pool, which, as I mentioned earlier, that work has started. The parking lot, well, the parking lot is going to be used as a staging area first. And I can find out certainly by next week's Playland Advisory Committee meeting, I can find out more on that. Same thing with the bathrooms. You asked about the bathroom project. As far as the status, that actually may be completed, but I'm not 100% sure. So I will double check on that. And then the fire suppression system, which unfortunately, since you asked about that one, it reminds me of, you know, of that last meeting that was held with the folks from Standard, and one of the people, you know, who this was at the point where they were kind of doing that negative PR campaign, saying that if only we had had a fire suppression system, then the carousel wouldn't have burned. But in fact, what I learned after that meeting was that the carousel already had a fire suppression system. And in fact, it worked. That fire would have been a lot worse if it hadn't been there. So as to the whole suppression system, I know that, you know, some of that has to go in when the projects are completed. But I can, again, report back to you. There was a question from Suki Van Dyke. Her question also related to the Tiki Bar. And she wanted to know about, would the big mature trees have to be removed? And the answer to that is, we don't know. What we're vetting right now, the agreement certainly has not come with the building plans for Tiki Bar under Standard Amusements. And then you asked another question, which was related to, because Tiki Bar is going to become so much bigger, does this mean that it will need an alienation of parkland? Now, alienation of parkland, for those that are unfamiliar, is a very, very specific term. New York State has a criteria that strongly favors parkland, but parks are allowed to have restaurants and services and things that are not necessarily parks, but that are services to the park. So as for instance, if you look at Rytown Park, we have Barley House. Barley House is still considered part of the park. So the question of the need for alienation, this is something that has come up each and every time that we've looked at the management agreement. And all I can say is this, not being an attorney, but under 2 county administrations with 2 different county attorneys, and I don't know how many deputy county attorneys, but all have said that there is not a need for alienation. Then Catherine Henney and Bill Walsh had both submitted questions, and their question was very, very similar, which is, you know, how are Rye residents supposed to be heard with their concerns related to, you know, with Standard? And this was something that, again, going back to that original agreement in 2015 and the creation of the advisory group, you know, again, the advisory committee was to be made up really predominantly with folks from Rye elected officials or people that work for Rye, like the city planner and the engineer, and you know, the head of the Playland Advisory Group. Now that Bill Myers is the head, you know, Bill, myself, you know, the legislator for the area, and then again, some of the groups of the organizations near the park, Edith Reed, Rytown Park, Rye Historical Society, because it's obviously, it has a lot of historical significance. So those were all part of the advisory board, which hasn't met in quite some time, but the hope is that that will meet, you know, quite regularly, and that Rye residents will actually have a great opportunity to give their input to Standard Amusements as they're looking at projects. You know, I can tell you that from the last meeting that was organized for the advisory group, you know, we are looking at their plans for the fountain area of Playland. And originally in 2016, what they had told us they were going to do with the fountain area was, you know, rebuild it, but they had, you know, initially thought it was going to be about $800,000. but instead what they showed us in that meeting was sort of something that looked like it belonged in Las Vegas, in my opinion, not necessarily on Long Island Sound, and it now had a price tag of $7 million. So in any case, I think that that's been scrapped. I think that there was some concern about that. And that is as I say, a mechanism and something that we've looked at for a while as to how to give residents a voice as things move forward. John, is it fixed with if we go to Joe Stout, is he going to be able to
First, I found Legislator Tubiolo, so let me unmute him, and then we'll try Joe Stout again, okay?
Okay, great.
Legislator Tubiolo, you on?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I just want to thank Legislator Catherine Parker for organizing this town hall. And, you know, as the chair of the Parks and Recreation Committee and legislator represents Mount Vernon and Yonkers, you know, Playland's very special to all of us, and we'll all, you know, I take this very seriously. And for me, I'll speak for myself, I'm here to listen to everyone's opinion and perspective and making the best educated decision I can. So anyone can feel free to contact me. I've been talking to quite a few people, and I'm happy to be here. So once again, thank you, Legislator Catherine Parker, and I'm here to listen. Thank you.
Okay, 1 second. Bear with me.
Thank you, David.
Okay. Joe, are you there, Joe?
I hope so. Can anybody hear
Yes.
me now?
Yes.
Hallelujah.
We found Joe. Okay.
Three different sets of headphones, and here I am. Thank you for your patience. I'm Joe Stout. I'm the executive director of the Westchester Parks Foundation. We are the only advocacy group that supports the entire county park system. We engage the public so that they'll use our great park system, they'll advocate for our great park system, and they'll invest in our great park system. And I would like to echo everybody else's thoughts here to thank Legislator Parker for hosting the town hall. Playland is an iconic spot. Some of you know, in a former life, I was the Parks Commissioner. I'm not speaking as a private citizen or the former Parks Commissioner, but I got a lot of years of Playland under my belt. If you're interested at some point, I have a stack of studies that go back to 1929 about how to fix Playland and what we could do to make Playland better. But thank you for hosting this. I'd also like to acknowledge your colleagues on the Board of Legislators who have spent an inordinate amount of time on this contract for obvious reasons, but it's certainly much appreciated. And Legislator Borgia, you said it earlier, you know, this park belongs to the people of Westchester County, and you are the elected representatives of those people, and to do this diligence is very important. We also congratulate the county attorney because he was handed a not a good scenario, a difficult court scenario, and not a good contract. And we believe that he's done an excellent job of getting to a better spot. I know you talked about alienation before, Legislator. We still believe that the language in this contract as amended could constitute an alienation. It contains language that is more typical of a lease rather than a revocable license. So you know, we are concerned that leases require alienation legislation. We also have submitted, I know Henry Neal spoke about it, a proposed amendment to the best interest section 23C, the best interest of the county clause, that does in no way affect the financial arrangements of the contract, but does give the county some more flexibility and control over the things that you all have been raising to think it's important. Our board and the foundation would like to ask you to include that proposed amendment in whatever you send to the bankruptcy court, so to at least to have the conversation. Whether Standard agrees to it or doesn't, I mean, that's for the judge to decide. I don't think we should preclude, or you should preclude submitting something that would give you more control over what happens at that park. You know, Playland for the longest time has been the most visited park by county residents. Even though most of the people who go there are not residents, it is the most visited park by county residents. Something you may not know, that when you include Rydtown Park and Edith Reed Sanctuary, it is the largest stretch of publicly accessible open space on either side of Long Island Sound. And to not have control over that space from the elected officials of the county and the Parks Department is just not a good scenario. So thank you again, for all you're doing here to make we all want Playland to exist, to thrive, and be a great park that it is. And we appreciate all your efforts in trying to make that happen. And obviously available for a resource, questions, any way we can help you to get to a decision that you're more comfortable with. But I appreciate your putting up with my lack of technological skills. Thank you.
It was worth the effort. I appreciate it. John, do we have any other people that have submitted?
Yeah,
Now, I will say, if you'd like to speak, I'd love to hear from you. Just put maybe in the chat, put that you'd like to be unmuted and that you'd like to put something on the record.
William Walsh asked, so he's going to be next. Give me 1 second.
Great.
Okay, Mr. Walsh, can you hear us? Okay. Well, try now. I think you're unmuted. Mr. Walsh?
Hello.
Oh, okay. Mr. Walsh is
Hi
on.
there.
Hi, Catherine.
Hey, Bill. Thank you for joining.
Sure. Hey, and a shout out to Joe Stout. I haven't seen him in years, but he was the. I worked with Joe when I was the chair of the local committee over here. Thanks, Catherine, for taking this time. So I just would want to just mention to the other legislators who don't live in this neighborhood why, as members of the advisory committee, we're so concerned about maintaining dialogue with the park. The current park management has been fabulous at working with us about our local concerns. The day-to-day operation of the park for those of us who live right next to it is almost existential issues for the quality of life here. You know, a small example is they replace, and just a tiny little example, but it's perfect for how the communication can work. They replaced the lights in the pool parking lot, and they were extraordinarily bright. And we reached out to the management, and in 48 hours later, they were changing the lights and they toned them down. Not a big deal, but it is a big deal if it is immediately next to you. That's the kind of dialogue and cooperation that we've had with the current management, which is the county, because we have political influence. I'm very concerned about trying to meet with a commercial third-party operator who frankly doesn't give a damn about the people, about us, because we have no political influence. So to quickly summarize, that is why we're so concerned about how we maintain dialogue and influence with a commercial third-party operator.
Excellent. I appreciate that. And as I said earlier, you know, it is definitely something that I think our county executive has done an excellent job of having the county, with the good neighbor policy that he introduced, you know, making it very clear that, you know, we understand that very sensitive relationship. And I think, you know, our folks that work for the Parks Department and our DPW, well, our DPW commissioner is a Rye resident. So there's been a tremendous amount of sensitivity. As I say, I felt that the creation of an advisory group to standard was important to give a mechanism. You know, I hear you. I see that Kate Tiedemann, you know, I think, I don't know if you want to ask your, you know, unmute yourself. If you know, we can have John unmute you, and then, you know, we can have your question again about the pool or changes to the agreement. I guess changes to the agreement, I believe. Kate, I think I can. Kate, are you on? Hi there. If you could speak up a little bit, you're very soft.
Hi, sorry, is that better?
Yes, it is actually. Yes. Hi, good to hear your voice. I'm glad you joined.
Thanks for doing this. We just had a question. Now, is the agreement with Standard, is that set, or are there still changes to be made, like the Tiki Bar will not be taken over by them, or that the years will change and things like that? Or is everything set and we just kind of have to hopefully make the best of it?
So that's an excellent question. And the Board of Legislators, as part of doing our due diligence and going through, has made some tweaks, I would say, have made some suggestions. But the Tiki Bar itself, which personally, as I say, for reasons that I mentioned earlier, to me seems like you know, should not have been on the table to begin with. I don't know that that's something that you know, I think that's still yet to be determined whether or not that's an area that we could get some movement. But I join you in that thought. And again, just being, you know, all the issues that are related to a much bigger entity, sort of the public and, you know, the public areas and enjoyment concern me greatly.
Thank you. That helps. But it seems like a lot of this was done behind everybody's back. It doesn't seem like it's been very public announcing. And for, you know, the Rye mom who did, you know, has the lease there, it seems like they weren't given any chance to make any decisions about it. It just seems like a lot of stuff has been done behind the public's back, which is a shame.
Well, even with the Tiki Bar, that was something that, you know, I read in the paper. Again, this is because there's a lawsuit and these are lawyers trying to come to an agreement. Nothing against the county attorney. I mean, he's doing his job, but yes, I can appreciate, and Hillary and I have spoken of this, that, you know, it seems that I personally would have not imagined in a million years that the Tiki Bar would have been part of the agreement at all, but here we are.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'm not sure if anybody else has a question. I don't.
I'll raise it again. Anybody else would anybody like to ask a question? Just enter in the chat that you'd like to be unmuted. Give it a moment.
And I will say we did have some people that got in late, and we are recording this, so I have everybody's email, and I will try to make sure that the full event is sent out to everybody who might have missed a part of it. Okay, William
All right.
Myers. Hold on one second, William. One second. Okay, William, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Oh,
Yes, Bill.
we can. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Bill. It's fine as well. I just want to reiterate what Bill Walsh said, that it's critical for the Playland Advisory Board, the group of the committee that you know that is formed with members of people who live near Playland, to be involved in the discussion and have a say in terms of whether there's a noise issue or where there's construction. At least we get to know what's happening before it actually happens, so that we can make some sort of plans. So that, just, to get on the record that we would like to have a say and, include this committee in the dialogue with Standard.
Yes, Noah, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And yes, I think, probably going back and because you've been chair of the Playland Advisory Group, how long now?
Close to 6 years.
6 years.
I think 6 to 9 years. Yeah.
No, I mean chairing it. I know you've been
Chairing
on the
it, 6
committee a long
years.
time.
It's been about 6 years. 5 years?
Wow.
Yeah.
In 2015, you were chairing?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think that definitely you should be, part of that group that meets with Standard. Definitely.
Yeah, no, I think it's, I think, I mean, I've been involved with Playland since I was a teen as well, working at Playland. So I remember when Marriott ran Playland for a year, and that didn't last too long. But I really think it's important for the community to be involved in the discussions, as Bill pointed out.
Thank you. Well, thank you for joining and for speaking up. And do you want to again mention your meeting just in case there were some late people that joined?
Sure. We are going to hold a meeting on Tuesday at 7:30 for the community. I will make sure that it is posted on the town website, and more information to come. So if you'd like to join, please contact Catherine. She'll coordinate with me, and you'll see the invites momentarily. And we will hopefully have, I think Peter Tattaglia, the Commissioner of Park, will be on with us, as well as hopefully Josh and yourself and the committee.
Very good. And I think Catherine Henny has her hand raised. John, do you want to unmute her?
1 second. Catherine, you're on if you can hear us.
Thank you. I appreciate all the time you put into this. I've just recently been apprised of all of this going on, and I'm appalled at Standard Amusements' sort of backhandedness. A friend mentioned to me in Florida where a restaurant took over and charged people to go out on their pier because they had to go through the restaurant area. I was thinking, I hope something like that doesn't happen here, or are they going to build out to the pier and block the access to the back walkways? There just seems to be so many unknowns that it's really upsetting.
So we did ask the question, not of Standard directly, because again, because this is litigation, they didn't come in to meet with us, but through our county attorney, about public spaces. And I specifically asked, thinking of the spaces like the pier and prior to the restaurant, where it's a closed restaurant, the Tiki Bar had used that area for like hosting parties. And most of the time it's just a nice place for people to sit and relax. And then, when they had their catered parties, sometimes they would have things there. And I share your concerns, and we do not have a drawing or anything to know what Standard is planning for that, other than, again, they expect to make about $8 million annually, which tells me that's a lot of people going in and out of there. And 2 stories, 3 stories, how big? We don't have those answers.
Catherine, Hillary Chernin asked if she could revisit. Okay,
yeah,
give me
so
1 second.
Hillary, I'm happy to give you just another minute and a half if you want to unmute, if John has you unmuted.
I just unmuted her. So Hillary, you there?
I mean, I think that the idea of being involved in discussions is a great thing, but how is anyone supposed to feel confident that residents will be involved in discussions when, I mean, as a business operator who signed a 2-year lease and committed to $100,000 investment into a site, finds out on the news that after her 2-year period, she's not going to have an opportunity to rebid on the site fairly, which I'm asking for. No one would think that'd be automatic, but to fairly rebid on the site, but that it's been given away for 30 years after you sign a contract, after you make a commitment. And yet we should be confident that we're going to be involved in discussions and that our voice is going to mean anything. I mean, if anyone should have been taken into consideration, it would be the current operators there who the county asked to make an investment. And it's really not even financial. It's more the fact of the lack of transparency in this site being thrown in. And, you know, just to provide some numbers, in the county's own RFP in 2018, the reported gross receipts for the Tiki Bar were $3 million. And there is no way that a figure that Standard's anticipating to make out of that site cannot generate $8 million in gross sales. It's just not possible unless you're operating a multi-level facility all year round, enticing people to the area, which is otherwise, you know, pretty quiet during the winter time. It's just, the numbers don't match up. And to be given this site for an extra $100,000 for the county, when the Tiki Bar has been paying $200,000 is a gimme. Somebody is giving this site away as a you know, basically backdoor deal. And it just doesn't financially make sense. It's insulting to taxpayers. It's insulting to residents to have this slipped in under our nose. Forget about the current business owner. I'm talking now as a resident. And then, and to have any confidence that our voices will be heard when we've never been heard in this deal. No one's been heard. No one's been taken into consideration. And this is just one of many. Not to mention that Standard has a plan to build 6 additional restaurant concessions on the property, many more on the boardwalks. In those empty buildings by the Children's Museum, there's going to be they're proposing additional restaurants. So this is going to be like Las Vegas or like the Jersey Shore, where there's just going to be a boardwalk full of restaurants. It's just really disheartening, and it's really just upsetting how the county has sold out this piece of land that supposedly belongs to the residents, and yet we have no say.
Well, I can appreciate and totally understand why you feel the way you do. And, you know, I would have bad taste in my mouth if I were you as well. I have a bad taste in my mouth as a legislator who wasn't apprised of this prior to getting handed a proposal. So I'm with you. And, you know, I can appreciate that. And, you know, it is certainly a note to, you know, residents. I think that, you know, this is an area that certainly affects Rye residents more than other people in the county, for sure. Anyone else? I don't see another hand raised. John, is there anybody? I'm not looking at the complete list of attendees, or are we?
Wait, hold on. I don't know if Catherine has her hand up again. Let me just see if she wanted to speak again. 1 second. Catherine, did you want to say something again?
I just want to finish up a little bit that, you know, we, having grown up in Rye, loved Rye, and the thought of a 6-story wedding venue, you know, at the pier there is just unthinkable. And yet Rye residents have always banded together. We didn't have the Robert Moses Bridge. We didn't have the big sports center in the parking lot. I live in Rye Colony, and we're trying to work out things with Avon. We've also been involved in the thing with United Hospital and what that was going to affect the residents in the Peck Avenue area. Osborne School. So, if we do get Rye residents together, maybe we can make a difference, because traditionally we have, really stuck together when something was important to us. So I would hope that that would be something that would happen. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Any of my colleagues, anybody else want to make any final thoughts? Legislator Marr?
Thank you, Catherine, and I'll shout again. Just everyone should be mindful that this may be voted out of the pertinent committees of the Board of Legislators tomorrow. There's certainly pressure on us to do that. We're trying to slow it down a little bit to get some more information and more feedback, both from the community and from well, certain experts and that sort of thing. And it would be on track for us to vote, for the full board to vote on this Monday night. So there's some time pressure here as well. And I have, and to go back to the two distinguished attorneys who did not identify themselves as distinguished attorneys, but they are Mr. Neal and Mr. Stout. There is a legal argument here that is not frivolous. It's not off the wall. I think, I'm an attorney myself, and I think it sounds pretty good. And that's that there is an instance of parkland alienation, both in the agreement as proposed, and also in the one that currently is supposedly in effect from 2015, 2016. And I think, that I think we at least have some leverage with that argument to get a little bit more, or a lot more, control of the park. And, possibly take this back to the bankruptcy court to litigate, or go to the state court. Because, when you have a municipal corporation, which is what the county is, it's there's a higher standard as to the formalities of what that corporation can do as opposed to a business corporation. You have to dot every I, cross every T, go to the correct subdivision of the government to get the proper approvals. And from my perspective, the original agreement is void as of now. And I'm still willing to proceed on that basis, because not only is it not a good agreement, it's a void agreement from the beginning. And I won't bore you by going into all the details of why I think it's so, but there's a lot of good factors on our side. It's not a bright line rule that you call it a lease versus a license. The court looks beyond what people call it, beyond, they're calling it a management agreement, and and looks at the time length. It's not a specific time length, but boy, 30 or 35 years is a long time to give up control of parkland. And there is a court that may just find that that's an issue of parkland alienation, which means you have to go to the state legislature to pass a law and have that signed by the governor, whoever he or she may be at that time. And I'm ready to fight this some more. Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. Yes. Thank you for having this forum.
All right. Anyone else? Last call. Well, I will say thank you all who have participated tonight. I think it was a good discussion, and I appreciate all of you who, had questions and were part of the dialogue. And as Legislator Marr said, this has been moving along. There is a court case, so that has put a little bit of set a time clock, and it has been moving along. And I felt that you needed a voice and needed to be heard. And if I was correct in my assumptions that there was reason to be concerned, then some of you would have reason to be concerned. So in the meantime, I will say thank you again, and to be continued. If you would like, if something comes to you and very soon about this, you want to follow up, my email is parker@westchesterlegislators.com. Thank you.